The day of my father's will reading started like any other at Harrison and Associates law firm. Leather chairs, mahogany tables, and the distinct scent of old money that permeated the air. I sat quietly, my black dress still wrinkled from the funeral, while my brother Michael lounged in his Italian suit, radiating confidence. I had spent the last week in a fog of grief, barely eating, barely sleeping. My father, brilliant entrepreneur, dedicated parent, my biggest supporter, was gone. Meanwhile, Michael had spent that same week throwing parties at his penthouse, celebrating his upcoming promotion as he called it. "Let's begin," Mr. Harrison said, adjusting his reading glasses. The elderly lawyer had handled our family's legal affairs for 30 years. He unfolded a document, cleared his throat, and started reading. "I, James William Porter, being of sound mind." I tried to focus on the words, but my mind kept drifting to my last conversation with Dad. It was just 3 weeks ago, over dinner at his favorite steakhouse. "Emma," he had said, his eyes twinkling despite his illness, "I've watched you build your consulting business from scratch. No handouts, no favors. Just pure determination. You remind me so much of myself at your age." He had reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "I've made arrangements. Everything's taken care of. You'll be able to expand your business, help more people. Just promise me you'll keep building, keep growing." I had promised, tears in my eyes, not knowing those would be our last moments together. Mr. Harrison's voice snapped me back to reality. "And to my daughter Emma Porter, I leave." He stopped abruptly, frowning at the paper. Something flickered across his face, confusion, then concern. "This can't be right," he muttered, shuffling through the papers. Michael leaned forward, his smile sharp as a razor. "Is there a problem?" "According to this document," Mr. Harrison said slowly, "the entire estate, including Porter Enterprises and all associated assets, approximately valued at $12 million, is to be transferred solely to Michael Porter." The room started spinning. "That's impossible," I whispered. "The document clearly states," Michael cut in smoothly, "that Dad believed I was the only one capable of running his legacy." He pulled out a folded paper from his breast pocket. "I have a copy right here, if you'd like to verify." Mr. Harrison accepted the paper, comparing it to his own. "The signatures match, but what?" Michael challenged. "Everything's in order. Unless you're suggesting our father wasn't of sound mind." I stared at my brother, the stranger wearing designer clothes and a triumphant smirk. "Dad would never do this," I said. "He told me himself he'd made arrangements." Michael's laugh cut through the air like broken glass. "Oh, sweet knave Emma. Always Daddy's little girl, weren't you? Did you really think he'd trust his life's work to someone who plays with spreadsheets in a tiny office? You don't deserve this inheritance. You never did." "Michael," Mr. Harrison interjected, "your sister's consulting firm has shown remarkable growth." "A consulting firm?" Michael scoffed. "Please, she helps small businesses with their accounting. It's glorified bookkeeping. Porter Enterprises needs a real leader." I sat there, numb, as Mr. Harrison continued reading the details. Every property, every account, every share of the company, all going to Michael. Even Dad's vintage car collection, which he and I had restored together during my teenage years. When the reading finished, Michael stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Well, this has been enlightening. Emma, I'll need you to clear out your office at Porter Enterprises by the end of the week. Can't have former employees hanging around, bad for morale." I had been working part-time at our father's company since college, learning the business from the ground up while building my own firm. Now Michael was erasing that too. "Mr. Harrison," I said quietly, "may I see the will?" The lawyer handed it over, sympathy in his eyes. The signature looked perfect, every loop, every curve exactly like Dad's. But something felt wrong. The words weren't his style, the tone too formal, too cold. "One more thing," Michael announced from the doorway. "I'm selling the lake house." My head snapped up. "You can't. Mom loved that house. Dad promised he'd never sell it." "Dad's not here anymore, is he?" Michael's smile was cruel. "And technically, it's my house now. I'm thinking of turning it into a private club. Much better investment than keeping it as some sort of shrine." He walked out, leaving me alone with Mr. Harrison in the suddenly too quiet office. "Emma," the lawyer said gently, "something isn't right here. Your father discussed his plans with me several times over the years. This will. It contradicts everything he ever said. I ran my fingers over the signature, remembering all the times I'd watched Dad sign documents in his office. The signature's perfect, I murmured. Too perfect. Mr. Harrison leaned forward. What do you mean? Dad's hands shook in his final months. The medication made it worse. This signature, I traced the smooth lines. There's no tremor, not even a slight one. The lawyer's eyes widened. Are you suggesting? I need to make some calls, I said, standing up. And I need copies of every document Michael submitted since Dad got sick. That night, I sat in my apartment, my sanctuary away from the Porter family drama, surrounded by papers, business records, bank statements, correspondence. I was looking for a pattern, a clue, anything that would explain how my brother had managed to steal my inheritance. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael. Cleaning crew comes to your office tomorrow. Better hurry if you want to keep your little plants. I ignored it, focusing instead on my laptop screen. Something caught my eye, a string of large transfers from Porter Enterprises to offshore accounts, all within the last 3 months. The amounts were carefully structured to avoid immediate suspicion, but together they painted a disturbing picture. My brother hadn't just stolen my inheritance. He'd been embezzling from the company for months, possibly years. A plan began forming in my mind. I thought about my consulting firm, about the connections I'd built, the trust I'd earned in the business community. Michael saw it as glorified bookkeeping, but what he didn't understand was that I had access to something he never would, the loyalty of small business owners who formed the backbone of our city's economy. I picked up my phone and dialed a number. David, it's Emma Porter. Remember that investment opportunity we discussed? I'm ready to move forward. But first, I need your help with something. The game was about to change, and Michael had no idea what was coming. 5 years passed like a whirlwind. While Michael paraded around the city as Porter Enterprises' new CEO, I worked silently, methodically, building something he could never imagine. The day everything changed started with a phone call. Miss Porter? My assistant's voice was tinged with amusement. Your brother is here for his interview. I smiled, remembering Michael's desperate email from last week. He'd applied to Phoenix Consulting Group, my company, not knowing I was the founder and CEO. After running Porter Enterprises into the ground, he was now begging for a job at what had become one of the city's most successful firms. Send him in, I said, turning my chair to face the floor-to-ceiling windows. And Lisa? Make sure the security team is recording. The door opened. I heard his footsteps, no longer confident strides in Italian leather shoes, but hesitant steps in what sounded like department store loafers. Please take a seat, I said, still facing the windows. Thank you for seeing me. Michael's voice had lost its arrogant edge. I've heard incredible things about Phoenix Consulting. Your growth over the past 5 years is unprecedented. I slowly turned my chair around. The look on his face was worth every second of the past 5 years. Hello, Michael. He nearly fell out of his chair. Emma? What? How? Surprised to see your glorified bookkeeper sister running a $200 million company? I asked pleasantly. His face went through a series of emotions: shock, confusion, anger, fear. This is impossible. Phoenix Consulting Group is mine, I finished. Built from scratch after you stole my inheritance. Ironic, isn't it? You thought Dad's company was the prize. But I built something worth far more. He tried to recover, straightening his cheap tie. Well, this is wonderful. Families should stick together. I always knew you had potential. Save it, I cut him off. Let's talk about why you're really here. Porter Enterprises is failing, isn't it? The offshore accounts are empty. The investors are asking questions. The color drained from his face. How did you? I opened a folder on my desk. 5 years ago, you thought you were so clever with your forged will and embezzled funds. But you forgot one thing. I'm actually good with numbers. I laid out documents one by one. Bank transfers, forged signatures, proof of systematic fraud. While you were busy playing CEO, I was building a network of the city's most influential small business owners. People you considered beneath you. They trusted me with their books, their secrets, their connections. And they were happy to help when I asked them to keep an eye on Porter Enterprises transactions. Michael slumped in his chair. What do you want? Want? I laughed. I don't want anything from you. but the SEC might be interested in these documents, and the police will definitely want to talk about Dad's forged will. You can't prove anything, he said, but his voice shook. I pressed a button on my desk phone. Mr. Harrison, would you join us? The door opened, and our father's old lawyer walked in, carrying a briefcase. Actually, she can prove everything, Mr. Harrison said. I've spent 5 years gathering evidence. Your father suspected you were embezzling. That's why he changed his will 2 weeks before he died. The real will, not your forged version. He pulled out a document. This is the authentic will, signed and notarized at the hospital. I kept it safe until Emma had built enough protection around herself. Your father left the company to both of you equally, but with a condition. Emma would have controlling interest because he trusted her judgment. Michael lunged for the document, but security was faster. 2 guards appeared instantly, their presence commanding respect. Don't embarrass yourself further, I said quietly. It's over. You've ruined everything, he spat. You and Dad never understood. I deserve that company. No, Michael. You deserve this moment, watching everything crumble because of your own greed. Dad knew exactly what you were. That's why he made arrangements to protect his legacy from you. I stood up, smoothing my designer dress, worth more than Michael's entire outfit. The SEC will be here in 20 minutes. I suggest you use that time to decide how cooperative you want to be. You can't do this. I'm your brother. You stopped being my brother the day you forged Dad's will. Family isn't about blood, Michael. It's about trust, respect, and integrity, 3 things you never understood. As security escorted him out, I turned to Mr. Harrison. Thank you for everything. He smiled warmly. Your father would be so proud, Emma, not just of your success, but of how you achieved it, through hard work and integrity. Later that evening, I drove to the lake house, my lake house now, the property reclaimed along with everything else Michael had stolen. The sunset painted the water in shades of gold, just like when Mom was alive. My phone buzzed with news alerts. Porter Enterprises hair arrested for fraud. Phoenix Consulting Group CEO reveals family drama behind business success. Emma Porter, from disinherited daughter to business empire builder. I smiled, remembering Dad's words. Keep building, keep growing. I had kept my promise, but in my own way. Instead of inheriting a legacy, I had built one. The next morning, I walked into my office to find it buzzing with energy. Our latest acquisition, Porter Enterprises, would need restructuring. The company Dad built would survive, but under new leadership guided by the values he had taught me. On my desk, I found an old photo of Dad and me working on his vintage Mustang. Behind it stood my team, the family I had chosen, people who shared my vision and values. Ready for the board meeting? Lisa asked, tablet in hand. I looked around at the empire I had built, so much greater than the inheritance I had lost. More than ready. Michael's arrest made headlines for weeks. The evidence was overwhelming, not just the forged will and embezzlement, but years of fraud and deception. He faced significant prison time. But my focus was on the future. Phoenix Consulting Group continued to grow, now helping businesses across the country. The lake house became a retreat for employees and their families, and Dad's vintage car collection, restored to its former glory, each car a reminder of the lessons he taught me. 1 year later, I received a letter from Michael, written from prison. He begged for forgiveness, for a job when he got out, for another chance at being family. I wrote a simple response. The greatest inheritance Dad left wasn't his money or his company. It was his integrity. That's something you can't steal, and something you never understood. Good luck with your rehabilitation. Today, Phoenix Consulting Group is valued at over $500 million. The story of how I built it, after losing my inheritance to a greedy brother, has become a legend in business circles. But the real victory isn't in the numbers. It's in the legacy I built, the people I've helped, and the values I've upheld. Sometimes, losing an inheritance is just the push you need to build something far greater than what you lost. Dad always said success wasn't about what you were given, but what you built with your own hands. Looking at my empire now, I know he was right. Michael may have stolen my inheritance, but he inadvertently pushed me to create something far more valuable, a legacy of my own. And that's something no one can ever take away. The crystal glasses clinked against the marble dining table as my mother set down another bottle of champagne. The Morrison family's annual achievement dinner was in full swing, though I hardly felt like celebrating. My sister Victoria sat at the head of the table, practically glowing in her designer dress as she detailed her latest promotion. And just like that, I became the youngest VP in Marshall & Sons history, she'd announced, earning appreciative murmurs from our assembled family members. The CEO said my restructuring plan was brilliant. I took another sip of water, trying to blend into the expensive wallpaper of my parents' dining room. These dinners had become a tradition over the past 5 years, a chance for everyone to brag about their accomplishments while subtly undermining anyone who didn't meet the family's elite standards. Elizabeth, my Aunt Patricia's sharp voice cut through my thoughts. Still doing that consulting work. All eyes turned to me, and I could feel the judgment radiating from each carefully maintained expression. At 32, I was the family disappointment, the one who'd walked away from a prestigious position at Goldman Sachs to start my own consulting firm. Yes, I replied simply, but before I could elaborate, Victoria let out a dramatic sigh. Poor Elizabeth, still a nobody after all these years, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. You know, we have some entry-level positions opening up at Marshall & Sons. I could put in a good word. She's just a consultant, my mother added with a heavy sigh, refilling Victoria's glass while pointedly ignoring mine. We had such high hopes. I felt my jaw tighten, but kept my expression neutral. If they only knew that just a consultant was a carefully crafted facade. None of them had any idea that over the past 5 years, I'd built Shadow Peak Consulting into one of the most powerful firms in the industry, operating through a complex network of shell companies and subsidiaries. Well, not everyone can be as successful as Victoria, my father chimed in, beaming at my sister. She's about to close the biggest acquisition in Marshall & Sons history. The merger with Global Dynamics will transform the entire company. Victoria preened under the praise, but I had to suppress a smile. The Global Dynamics merger, if only they knew the truth about who really controlled that deal. Actually, I said carefully, I have some news of my own. Oh darling, my mother interrupted, perhaps save the small updates for another time. Victoria was just about to tell us about her new penthouse. I fell silent, watching as my sister launched into a detailed description of her luxury apartment's view. Let them have tonight, I thought. Tomorrow would change everything. Later that evening, as I drove back to my modest apartment, the one my family assumed was all I could afford, my phone buzzed with an urgent message from Marcus, my chief operations officer. Everything's set for tomorrow. The Marshall & Sons board has signed off on all terms. They have no idea what's coming. I smiled, thinking of the carefully orchestrated plan that would unfold in less than 12 hours. For 5 years, I'd operated in the shadows, building an empire while my family dismissed me as a failure. Shadow Peak Consulting wasn't just another firm, it was a powerhouse that had systematically acquired controlling interests in key companies across multiple industries. And tomorrow, Marshall & Sons would discover that their precious merger with Global Dynamics came with an unexpected twist. The company they thought they were acquiring was actually one of my shell corporations. The terms they'd so eagerly signed would give Shadow Peak Consulting complete control over Marshall & Sons. Victoria's career-making deal was about to become her biggest humiliation. I parked my car and took the elevator to my apartment, not the real one in the penthouse of the city's most exclusive building, but the modest space I maintained for family visits. Inside, I opened my safe and pulled out the final documents for tomorrow's reveal. The morning would bring the kind of dramatic revelation my family seemed to love so much. Only this time, the shock would be on them. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Marcus. Your name is already being added to the building. By sunrise, everyone will know who really runs Marshall & Sons. I poured myself a glass of wine, not the cheap variety my family assumed I drank, but a vintage worth more than Victoria's monthly salary. Tomorrow would mark the end of Elizabeth the nobody, the family disappointment, the just a consultant. Tomorrow they'd learn exactly who I'd become, while they were too busy looking down their noses to notice my rise. The next morning, I stood in my real office, the entire top floor of the Shadow Peak building downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of the city skyline, including the Marshall & Sons headquarters where my name was being installed in gleaming letters. Miss Hamilton, my assistant Sarah appeared at my door. They're waiting in the main conference room. Your sister is quite vocal about the delay. I smiled, adjusting my tailored Armani suit. a far cry from the intentionally modest clothes I wore to family functions. How long have they been waiting? 20 minutes. Your father has mentioned his importance approximately 7 times. Perfect. I picked up my tablet and started toward the conference room. And the name change on the building. Just completed. It's visible from the conference room windows. I paused outside the heavy oak doors, hearing Victoria's sharp voice cutting through them. This is ridiculous. Do they have any idea who we are? When I meet this mysterious CEO of Shadow Peak, I pushed open the doors. The conversation died instantly. Victoria, mid-rant, froze with her mouth open. My father dropped his coffee cup, dark liquid spreading across the pristine white tablecloth. My mother's perfectly maintained facade cracked as her face went pale. Elizabeth? Victoria finally managed. What are you doing here? This is a private meeting for senior executives. I walked calmly to the head of the table, setting down my tablet. Good morning, everyone. I apologize for the delay. Shall we discuss the terms of Shadow Peak's acquisition of Marshall & Sons? Acquisition? My father stood up, his face reddening. What nonsense is this? We're here to finalize our merger with Global Dynamics. Where's Shadow Peak's CEO? I sat down, smoothing my skirt. You're looking at her. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria's designer heel clicked against the floor as she took an unconscious step backward. This is impossible, she whispered. You're just a small-time consultant. You work out of that tiny office downtown. That office. I smiled. It's one of our meeting spaces for local clients. Shadow Peak Consulting operates in 37 countries, Victoria. We own this building. I gestured to the window. And as of today, we own Marshall & Sons. My mother found her voice. But Global Dynamics is a subsidiary of Shadow Peak. I finished for her. Just like the investment firm that's been buying up Marshall & Sons shares for the past 3 years. Shares that give us controlling interest as of this morning. Victoria sank into her chair, her face ashen. The merger terms are non-negotiable. I pulled up the final contract on the room's main screen. Shadow Peak will assume control of all operations. We'll be restructuring the management team, starting with the immediate termination of the current vice president of operations. Victoria's head snapped up. You can't fire me. I'm your sister. Exactly why I should have noticed your incompetence sooner. I turned to my father. The board has already approved the terms. They did so last night after reviewing the company's complete financial position, including the creative accounting that's been hiding Marshall & Sons' real debt. My father slumped in his chair, decades of authority draining from his face. Why, Elizabeth? Why go to all this trouble? I stood up slowly, walking to the window where my name now crowned the Marshall & Sons building. 5 years ago, when I left Goldman Sachs, you told me I was throwing my life away, that I'd never amount to anything without the family name to prop me up. I turned back to face them. So I built something better. Something bigger. While you were all laughing at my little consulting business, I was creating an empire. Sarah entered silently, distributing folders to everyone at the table. These documents outline the transition. I continued. Victoria, your security clearance has already been revoked. Human Resources will escort you out after this meeting. Mom, Victoria pleaded, turning to her mother who sat frozen in her chair. Do something. But there was nothing she could do, nothing any of them could do. Last night at dinner, I said, my voice cutting through Victoria's rising panic, you called me a nobody. You've spent years mocking my career choices, belittling my achievements, assuming my silence meant weakness. I walked to the door, then turned back one final time. I want you to remember this moment. Remember that the sister you dismissed, the daughter you devalued, now owns everything you spent your lives bragging about. The next hour passed in a blur of signatures and legal requirements. Victoria was escorted out by security, mascara streaming down her face. My father avoided my eyes as he surrendered his company keys. My mother, for once, had nothing to say. Later that evening, I stood in my office, watching the sun set behind the city skyline. Sarah appeared with a glass of champagne, the same expensive brand my family had been drinking last night while mocking my supposed failures. Was it worth it? She asked quietly. All these years of hiding your success. I thought about the decades of condescension, the dismissive comments, the patronizing offers of entry-level positions. Then I thought about the empire I built, the thousands of employees who relied on me, the positive changes I could now implement at Marshall & Sons. It wasn't about revenge, I said finally. It was about proving that success doesn't always look the way they think it should, that you don't have to follow their path to build something meaningful. I raised my glass to the gleaming letters that now crowned the building. Elizabeth Hamilton, CEO. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the most powerful. Sometimes the child they underestimate becomes the giant they must answer to. And sometimes the sweetest victory isn't in proving them wrong. It's in showing them that you never needed their approval in the first place. The following year brought changes no one in my family could have predicted. Marshall & Sons, under Shadow Peak's leadership, transformed into a more ethical, innovative company. Victoria eventually found a mid-level position at another firm, hopefully having learned the value of humility. My parents, their social standing shattered, stopped hosting their achievement dinners. And me, I kept building, growing, expanding, not to prove anything to them anymore, but because I discovered something they never understood. True success isn't about titles or family names or yearly bonuses. It's about creating something meaningful, something that lasts. These days, when people ask about my path to success, I tell them the truth. Sometimes the best response to those who underestimate you isn't to prove them wrong immediately. It's to build something so magnificent that when they finally realize their mistake, it's already too late to matter. The basement was cold again. I pulled my thin blanket tighter, listening to the laughter drifting down from upstairs where my family was celebrating my sister Isabella's new promotion. The familiar sound of crystal glasses clinking, of expensive shoes clicking against hardwood floors, of life happening above while I existed below. At 25, I was still living in my parents' basement, not by choice, but by their decree. Madison doesn't need a real room, they decided years ago. She's not going anywhere in life anyway. My sister Isabella got the master suite with its own bathroom. My brother Oliver had the room with the private balcony. And me? I got the unfinished basement with its concrete floors and exposed pipes, complete with a camping cot that squeaked every time I moved. The only person who ever treated me differently was Grandma Rose. While my parents lavished attention and resources on my gifted siblings, Grandma would sneak down to the basement with cookies and stories. "They don't see your light, sweet girl," she'd whisper, "but I do." Now Grandma was gone, passed away last week in her sleep. The funeral had been yesterday, a grand affair where my siblings had performed their roles perfectly. Isabella, the successful corporate lawyer, gave a touching speech. Oliver, the brilliant surgeon, shared poignant medical stories. And I stood quietly in the back, wearing the only black dress I owned, purchased from a thrift store. Madison. My mother's sharp voice cut through my thoughts, echoing down the basement stairs. "Come up here. Your sister is making an announcement." I climbed the stairs slowly, emerging into the warm, bright kitchen that I was only allowed to use for basic meals. My family was gathered around Isabella, their faces glowing with pride. As I was saying, Isabella continued, barely glancing at me, "The firm is making me junior partner, the youngest in the company's history." More crystal glasses clinked. More congratulations flowed. My father beamed with pride. "That's my girl. Always knew you'd make us proud." Oliver chimed in from his position by the expensive coffee maker I wasn't allowed to touch. Between my new position as head of neurosurgery and Isabella's partnership, the family name is really soaring. My mother nodded, then glanced at me with familiar disappointment. If only all our children had such drive. I thought about the secret I'd been keeping for the past 5 years, the online business degree I'd earned at night while they thought I was wasting time on my laptop. The small investment portfolio I'd built using the money Grandma had secretly given me, the patents I'd registered under a different name. But none of that mattered to them. In their eyes, I was just the family failure, the cautionary tale they used to motivate my siblings. "Work hard," they'd say, "or you'll end up like Madison." "Don't forget about tomorrow," my mother announced. "The will reading is at 10 a.m. Everyone needs to look presentable." She shot me a warning look. "Madison, please wear something appropriate. Maybe Isabella can lend you something." Isabella smirked. I doubt anything of mine would fit her. I retreated back to my basement, their laughter following me down the stairs. What they didn't know was that Grandma Rose had visited me 3 months ago, her eyes twinkling with her familiar mischief. "Everything's arranged," she had whispered, pressing a small key into my hand. "When the time comes, you'll understand. Just remember, sometimes the ones they underestimate are the ones who surprise them most." I hadn't understood then, But tomorrow at the will reading, everything would change. The next morning, I arrived at Mr. Patterson's law office wearing my thrift store dress. My family was already there, dressed in designer morning wear, clustered together and ignoring me as usual. Now that everyone's here, Mr. Patterson began, adjusting his glasses. We can begin the reading of Rose Eleanor Montgomery's last will and testament. The first few items were predictable: family heirlooms to various cousins, small monetary gifts to longtime staff, donations to favored charities. My siblings shifted impatiently, waiting for the big revelations. To my grandchildren, Mr. Patterson continued, causing everyone to lean forward. To Isabella Montgomery, I leave my collection of legal books and journals. Isabella's triumphant smile faltered slightly. Books? Just books. To Oliver Montgomery, I leave my medical research papers and my father's old stethoscope. Oliver's face darkened. A stethoscope? Where was the money? And to Madison Montgomery, my family didn't even bother to look interested. What could Grandma possibly leave the failure? I leave the entirety of Montgomery Enterprises, including all subsidiaries, properties, and holdings, currently valued at approximately $400 million. The room froze. Mr. Patterson continued reading. But no one was listening anymore. My mother's face had gone ghostly white. My father's hands were shaking. Isabella's mouth hung open in a most unladylike manner. "That's impossible," Oliver finally sputtered. "Grandma didn't have that kind of money. She lived in that little cottage." Mr. Patterson smiled, pulling out a thick folder. "Actually, Mrs. Montgomery was one of the most successful silent investors in the country. The cottage was just for show. She owned significant portions of multiple Fortune 500 companies, several tech startups, and extensive real estate holdings, all of which are now legally transferred to Madison. I thought about all those nights in the basement when Grandma would teach me about stocks, about business strategies, about seeing opportunities others missed. While my family thought she was telling me fairy tales, she was actually grooming her successor. There must be some mistake, my mother insisted, her voice shrill. Madison doesn't know anything about running a business. She's not qualified. Actually, Mr. Patterson interrupted. Madison has been secretly running most of Montgomery Enterprises for the past 2 years, under Mrs. Montgomery's guidance. The company's value has doubled under her management. My family turned to stare at me, as if seeing me for the first time. The basement dweller. The failure. The secret businesswoman worth hundreds of millions. But this was just the beginning. What they didn't know was that Grandma's empire was far larger than even Mr. Patterson realized. The key she had given me would reveal much more than just money. It would uncover a legacy that would change everything. After the initial shock at the law office, my family's reactions were exactly what I expected. Isabella immediately started citing inheritance laws, looking for loopholes. Oliver called his friend who specialized in contesting wills. My parents shifted between begging and threatening. "Madison, darling," my mother's voice dripped with sudden sweetness. "We should discuss this as a family. You're not prepared to handle this kind of responsibility." I stood up, smoothing my thrift store dress. "Actually, I have a meeting to attend. Mr. Patterson, shall we?" He nodded, gathering his briefcase. "Yes, the board is waiting." "Board?" Isabella's voice cracked. "What board?" "Montgomery Enterprises Board of Directors," I replied calmly. "They're expecting their CEO." My father's face turned purple. "You can't possibly." "I've been acting CEO for the past year," I cut him off. "Grandma just made it official." I walked out of the office, leaving them sputtering in disbelief. But I wasn't done, not even close. Grandma's key was burning a hole in my pocket, and I knew exactly where it led. The cottage where Grandma had lived was exactly as she left it, small, quaint, seemingly modest. But I went straight to her study, to the old painting of roses that had always caught my eye as a child. Behind it was a safe. The key fit perfectly. Inside wasn't money or jewels, but something far more valuable: documents. Hundreds of them. Property deeds, stock certificates, corporate ownership papers, and a letter written in Grandma's elegant hand. "My dearest Madison, by now they know about Montgomery Enterprises." But that was just the beginning. While they were underestimating you, we were building an empire. The documents in this safe represent my true legacy: holdings in over 200 companies, properties across 6 continents, and controlling interests in some of the world's most successful corporations. Total value, approximately $2.8 billion. More importantly, they include evidence of your family's financial misconduct, your father's embezzlement, Isabella's insider trading, Oliver's medical insurance fraud. I kept it all, not for revenge, but for protection. Use it wisely. Love, Grandma. I sat in her old leather chair, reading through the documents with steadily growing amazement. The little cottage itself sat on land worth millions. The art on the walls, which my siblings had dismissed as cheap prints, were original masterpieces. My phone buzzed, multiple messages from my family. I ignored them and called Mr. Patterson instead. "Is everything in order?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. "Let's proceed with phase 2. Within hours, news of my true inheritance hit the financial press. My family's reactions were immediate and desperate. Isabella arrived at the cottage first, her designer heels sinking into the gravel driveway. "Madison, we need to talk. I've been looking at the legal framework of the inheritance and technically, I interrupted. You should be more worried about the SEC investigation into your trading activities last year." She went pale. "How did you?" "Grandma kept excellent records," I said simply, just like she documented Dad's creative accounting and Oliver's insurance schemes. "You wouldn't," she whispered. "We're family." Family? I stood up, finally letting years of hurt surface. Was I family when you all made me live in the basement? When you mocked every attempt I made to better myself? When you treated me like something stuck to the bottom of your designer shoes? My parents and Oliver arrived just then, bursting into the study with wild eyes. "Madison," my father started, "let's be reasonable." Reasonable. I picked up one of the files from Grandma's safe. "Like the reasonable way you diverted company funds to pay for Isabella's law school while telling me college wasn't for someone like me. Or the reasonable way you funded Oliver's luxury condo while I slept on a cot in the basement." My mother burst into tears, always her favorite manipulation tactic. "We only wanted what was best." "No," I cut her off. "You wanted what looked best. You wanted perfect children you could brag about at country club lunches. You wanted success you could show off. Meanwhile, Grandma and I built something real." "Built?" Oliver scoffed. "You just inherited it." I smiled, pulling up the company's financial reports on my laptop. "See these profit margins? That was me. These successful acquisitions. Also me. While you were bragging about your achievements, I was quietly running one of the largest private investment firms in the world." Their faces shifted from desperate to shocked as they realized the truth. I hadn't just inherited wealth, I had helped create it. "The basement apartment," my father said slowly, "all those nights we thought you were wasting time online. I was earning my business degree, managing investments, running companies." I stood up, straightening my shoulders. "Grandma saw what you never did. That success isn't about appearances, it's about substance." "What are you going to do?" Isabella asked, her legal bravado crumbling. "The basement apartment is being renovated into a homeless shelter. The mansion is being sold. The proceeds will fund scholarships for underprivileged students. Montgomery Enterprises will continue growing, but with a focus on ethical investment and community development. And us?" Oliver's voice was small. "You get exactly what Grandma left you, books and a stethoscope. Consider yourselves lucky I'm not turning over the evidence of your financial crimes." They left eventually, shoulders slumped, designer clothes somehow looking cheaper than my thrift store dress. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, not just for me, but for every person they'd looked down on. The next few months brought changes they never expected. I moved the company's headquarters to a building that also housed a free medical clinic and legal aid office. I started a foundation helping underprivileged students pursue their dreams. The basement where I'd lived was transformed into a shelter that gave people a chance to rebuild their lives. My family? They adjusted, slowly. Isabella took a job at a public defender's office, humbling work that actually helped people. Oliver started volunteering at free clinics. My parents, well, they're learning that true worth isn't measured by country club memberships. I kept Grandma's cottage exactly as it was, though now I understand why she chose to live simply despite her wealth. Success isn't about showing off, it's about making a difference. Sometimes at night, I sit in her study, looking at the painting that hid her safe, and I can almost hear her voice. "They didn't see your light, sweet girl, but now the whole world does." And she was right. The basement dweller they dismissed built something greater than their superficial success could ever be, a legacy of real change. That's worth more than all the billions in the world. My name is Marcus Chen, and for 15 years, my family thought I was just a janitor at Byte Tech Solutions. Every Sunday dinner was the same: subtle jabs, disappointed looks, and not-so-subtle suggestions about real careers. But what they didn't know was that while I was mopping floors at night, I was building something that would change everything. Marcus, you're 38 now. My mother sighed during our weekly family dinner, pushing her barely touched pasta around her plate. Don't you think it's time to find a real job? I kept my eyes on my food, letting the familiar sting of her words wash over me. Across the table, my sister Olivia adjusted her engagement ring, making sure the massive diamond caught the light. As a senior executive at Goldman Sachs, she never missed an opportunity to remind everyone of her success. "Mom, leave him alone," Olivia said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Not everyone is meant for success. At least he's honest work." The way she said honest work made it sound like a terminal illness. My father didn't even look up from his phone. As the former CEO of a Fortune 500 company, he'd long since given up on having a son who would follow in his footsteps. "Byte Tech Solutions," he muttered. "Cleaning up after real technologists. At least you get to be near success, even if you'll never achieve it." If they only knew that Byte Tech Solutions wasn't just where I worked. It was where I learned everything I needed to know about building my own tech empire. It started 15 years ago when I graduated with a computer science degree from MIT. My family expected me to join a prestigious tech company or follow my father into corporate leadership. Instead, I took a job as a night janitor at Byte Tech Solutions. "He's lost his mind," my mother had wailed when I told them. An MIT graduate choosing to be a janitor? Where did we go wrong? But I had a plan. During my final year at MIT, I developed an algorithm that could revolutionize how artificial intelligence processed natural language. The big tech companies would have bought it immediately, but I wanted to build something of my own. I needed time, access to high-end computing resources, and most importantly, invisibility. Byte Tech Solutions had everything I needed. As a night janitor, I had access to their entire building. No one paid attention to the quiet guy with the mop and bucket. No one noticed when I spent extra time cleaning the server rooms, studying their setup. No one cared when I stayed late, allegedly to polish the floors. During those late nights, while everyone thought I was just pushing a broom, I was learning everything about how a major tech company operated. I saw their mistakes, their inefficiencies, their missed opportunities. More importantly, I had unlimited access to their discarded equipment. Perfectly good computers and servers they threw away during upgrades. In the basement of my small apartment, I built my own mini data center from their cast-offs. Every night after my shift, I worked on refining my algorithm, testing it, improving it. I lived on coffee and determination, sleeping just 4 hours a day. "At least get your own apartment," my mother would plead during family dinners. "Living in that tiny basement apartment at your age. What will people think?" What they didn't know was that I owned the entire building. I bought it through a shell company when my first patent was quietly approved. The tiny basement apartment was just my cover. The real magic was happening in the secured upper floors, where I had built a state-of-the-art development facility. I called my company Phoenix Intelligence. The name was my private joke, rising from the ashes of discarded technology and overlooked potential. For 15 years, I operated in complete secrecy, using a network of shell companies and private investors who never met me in person. The janitorial job was my perfect cover. Who would suspect the quiet janitor was actually running a cutting-edge AI company? My algorithm evolved into something revolutionary, an AI system that could understand and process human emotion in real time. While other companies were still struggling with basic natural language processing, Phoenix Intelligence had created something that could understand the nuances of human communication, the subtle undertones of emotion in written and spoken words. Major tech companies started licensing our technology through our shell companies, never knowing they were dealing with the janitor who cleaned their offices. Byte Tech Solutions, my employer, became one of our biggest clients. I would sometimes sit in their lobby, supposedly on my break, watching executives rush past me to meetings where they discussed the brilliant technology from Phoenix Intelligence. As our success grew, I maintained my cover perfectly. I drove a 15-year-old car, wore second-hand clothes, and lived exactly as everyone expected a janitor to live. Every dollar I earned went back into the company or into secure investments. My family's disdain became my perfect camouflage. But everything was about to change. Yesterday, Phoenix Intelligence filed for its IPO. After 15 years of secrecy, the world would finally know who I really was. The timing wasn't my choice. Going public meant I had to reveal my identity as the founder and CEO. And tomorrow was my sister's wedding. The Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom sparkled with extravagance. My sister Olivia had spared no expense for her wedding, inviting over 500 guests, most of them business executives and social elites. I adjusted my simple black suit, bought off the rack as everyone expected from a janitor, and found my seat at the far corner of the family table. "Marcus," my mother hissed as I sat down, "couldn't you at least have bought a new suit for your sister's wedding? And that tie?" She shook her head, looking around to make sure none of her friends had noticed her embarrassing son. I touched the blue tie I was wearing, handmade Italian silk that cost more than my mother's entire outfit. But of course, she assumed it was a cheap knockoff. Sorry, Mom, it was the best I could afford. The wedding ceremony was exactly what you'd expect from a Goldman Sachs executive marrying a tech billionaire. Olivia floated down the aisle in a designer dress that probably cost more than what they thought I made in a year. Her fiancé James stood at the altar in a custom tuxedo, looking every bit the successful entrepreneur they all thought he was. What none of them knew was that James's company was on the verge of collapse. His revolutionary AI technology was years behind what Phoenix Intelligence had already developed. In fact, his company had recently begged Phoenix Intelligence for a partnership, not knowing they were pleading with the janitor who cleaned their competitors' offices. During the reception, I sat quietly, watching the celebration unfold. The CEO of Byte Tech Solutions was there. He walked right past me without a glance, never recognizing the janitor who had mopped his office floors for 15 years. Half of Silicon Valley's elite were in attendance, and none of them had any idea that the quiet man in the corner owned technology that made their companies possible. And now, the wedding planner announced, "Please turn your attention to the screens for a special presentation about the happy couple." The massive screens around the ballroom lit up with a glossy video about Olivia and James' perfect love story. But suddenly, the video flickered and changed. A breaking news alert appeared. Breaking! Phoenix Intelligence, Silicon Valley's most secretive company, files for IPO. Mysterious founder finally revealed. I watched my family's faces as my photograph appeared on the screen. Not a recent one. The same ID photo I'd used at Byte Tech Solutions for 15 years. The news anchor's voice filled the ballroom. In a shocking revelation, Marcus Chen, known to many as a janitor at Byte Tech Solutions, has been revealed as the founder and CEO of Phoenix Intelligence, the AI company valued at $8 billion. Sources say Chen has operated in complete secrecy for 15 years, building one of the most innovative tech companies in the world while maintaining his cover as a maintenance worker. The champagne glass slipped from my mother's hand, shattering on the marble floor. My father's face had gone completely white. Olivia, the bride, stood frozen in her designer dress, her perfectly made-up face twisted in shock. The news continued, detailing Phoenix Intelligence's revolutionary technology, its massive client lists, and its impact on the tech industry. Every major company in that ballroom was named as our client, including Byte Tech Solutions and James's failing startup. Additionally, Phoenix Intelligence owns the patents for the AI technology currently used by over 70% of major tech companies. Industry experts predict the IPO will make Chen one of the 20 wealthiest people in the world. James, my new brother-in-law, swayed slightly. His company's survival depended on the partnership they'd begged for last week. Now he realized he'd been pleading with his brother-in-law, the janitor he'd mocked at every family gathering. I stood up slowly, straightening my cheap tie. The room had fallen completely silent, all eyes turning to the corner where the janitor sat. My mother's hands trembled as she reached for me. "Marcus, why didn't you tell us?" I smiled, remembering every dismissive comment, every mockery, every time they'd made me feel small. Would you have believed me? When did any of you ever believe I could achieve anything meaningful? My father stood up, his business instincts kicking in. "Son, we should talk about this. As a family." Perhaps we can discuss some synergies with our companies. Actually, I said, checking my watch, I have a board meeting in an hour. We're discussing which AI patents to license and which ones to revoke. James's face went even paler. His company's survival depended entirely on Phoenix Intelligence's technology. Congratulations on the wedding, Olivia, I said softly. Consider your husband's company's partnership approved. Call it a wedding gift from the janitor. I walked out of the ballroom, leaving behind the shattered illusions of my family's perfect world. My phone buzzed continuously. Suddenly, everyone wanted to talk to the janitor who had outsmarted Silicon Valley. Outside, my driver waited with my real car. Not the old Honda I'd driven for show, but a custom Bentley I'd never used before today. As I settled into the leather seats, I thought about the past 15 years. The midnight coding sessions, the silent victories, the painful family dinners. My mother's words echoed in my head. When will you make something of yourself? I had made something of myself, something beyond their wildest expectations. But more importantly, I had done it my way, on my own terms, without their approval or support. The next morning, every major news outlet carried the story. The billionaire janitor, how one man built an empire in secret. My family's phones rang constantly with calls from friends and business associates, all trying to process the revelation that the man they'd mocked for years was now one of the most powerful figures in tech. Olivia cut her honeymoon short, rushing back to try to salvage relationships with clients who now knew her brother owned the technology their businesses depended on. My father's business friends avoided him, embarrassed by how they treated his son. My mother's social circle buzzed with gossip about how she failed to recognize her own son's genius. But I didn't care about their reactions anymore. In my office, my real office, not the janitor's closet, I looked out over the city skyline. On my desk sat a frame containing my old Byte Tech Solutions janitor ID, a reminder that success doesn't always wear a suit and tie. My assistant entered with a stack of messages. Your family has been calling nonstop. Your sister left 15 messages about urgent business matters. Your father wants to schedule a dinner to reconnect. And your mother. I held up my hand, smiling. Tell them I'm busy. I have some floors to mop. The truth was, I didn't need their acceptance anymore. I had built something remarkable, not despite their lack of faith, but because of it. Their dismissal had given me the perfect cover, the freedom to work without expectations or interference. As I sat in my office, reading the flood of news articles about the billionaire janitor, I realized that success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. And sometimes the best way to do that is to let them underestimate you. From my window, I could see Byte Tech Solutions building, where I'd spent 15 years watching, learning, and building my dream. Tonight, someone else would mop those floors. But the lessons I learned there, about patience, humility, and the power of being underestimated, would stay with me forever. After all, every empire has to start somewhere, even if it starts with a mop and bucket. My name is Emma Martinez Thompson. And if I've learned anything in the past year, it's that true value isn't always visible at first glance. Sometimes it's buried deep beneath the surface, protected by generations of silence. The story began at Henderson & Associates Law Office in Phoenix, Arizona, where my husband Michael and I sat with his family for the reading of his father's will. Robert Thompson Sr. had been a tough man to please in life, and it seemed he'd designed his will to continue that tradition after death. To my eldest son, Robert Jr., I leave the Thompson Energy corporate holdings and my position as CEO, the lawyer Reed. No surprise there. Robert Jr. had been groomed for that role since birth. To my daughter, Catherine, I leave the family estate in Paradise Valley and my art collection. Catherine smirked, already mentally redecorating. And to my youngest son, Michael, the lawyer paused, adjusting his glasses. I leave the old Thompson Ranch property in Serpent Valley, all 300 acres. The room erupted in poorly concealed laughter. Robert Jr. didn't even try to hide his amusement. Perfect, the family failure gets the worthless desert. Dad's sense of humor lasted right to the end. I squeezed Michael's hand as he stared at the floor. He'd spent years trying to earn his father's approval, turning down a promising career in environmental science to work at Thompson Energy. Nothing had ever been good enough. There was one condition, the lawyer continued, silencing the room. The Serpent Valley property cannot be sold for at least 1 year after my death. It must be maintained in its current condition. If these conditions are not met, the property reverts to Thompson Energy. What's to maintain? Catherine snorted. Rattlesnakes and cacti. But I noticed something odd. A slight tremor in the lawyer's hand as he read that part, a flicker of something in his eyes. And I remembered the last time we'd visited Robert Sr. in the hospital. How he gripped Michael's hand and whispered, "Protect the valley." We thought it was just delirium. The next day, Michael and I drove out to see our inheritance. The property lay 2 hours north of Phoenix, in a valley that lived up to its name. The winding road was marked by a weathered sign, Thompson Ranch, no trespassing. Dad used to talk about this place, Michael said as we bumped along the dirt road. Said his grandfather won it in a poker game back in the 1920s. Never did anything with it except pay the property taxes. The valley opened up before us, a stunning expanse of red rock and desert sage. In the distance, ancient cliffs rose like guardians, their faces etched by centuries of wind and rain. It was beautiful in a harsh, untamed way. "Look," I pointed to a cluster of old buildings, a small ranch house, a barn, and what looked like a storage shed, all weathered by decades of desert sun. As we explored the ranch house, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something. The buildings were old but solidly built. The location, while remote, had a strange beauty. Why had the Thompson family held onto this property for 3 generations without developing it? "Hey, come look at this," Michael called from what must have been his grandfather's office. He was holding a dusty ledger, its pages yellow with age. The ledger contained meticulous notes about the property, but they were odd. Instead of the expected ranch records, there were entries about geological surveys never filed, visitors turned away, and repeated mentions of something called the Guardian's Trust. "Your father kept this place exactly as his father left it," I mused, flipping through the pages. "And his father before him." "Why?" Before Michael could answer, a truck appeared in the driveway. Not the shiny SUVs his siblings drove, but an old pickup with tribal plates. A man stepped out, tall, weathered, probably in his 60s, wearing a turquoise belt buckle that caught the sunlight. "I am John Red Cloud," he said as we walked out to meet him, chief of the Navajo Nation's Council of Elders. "I've been waiting for you." Michael and I exchanged glances. "Waiting for us?" Chief Red Cloud nodded solemnly. "Your grandfather, your father's father, he was a friend to our people. He understood what this valley truly is, what it protects." "Protects?" Michael asked. The chief's eyes swept the valley, settling on a particular formation in the cliffs. "There are things in this world that should remain undisturbed. Your great-grandfather learned this. Your grandfather honored it. Your father," he paused, "your father struggled with the knowledge, but in the end he chose wisely." He reached into his truck and pulled out a worn leather map case. "Before your father died, he asked me to give you this when you were ready. I think that time is now." Inside the case was an old map of the valley, but unlike any map I'd seen before. It showed strange markings, ancient paths, and symbols I didn't recognize. And there in the center was something that made my breath catch. A detailed drawing of what lay beneath the valley floor. "This isn't just land," Chief Red Cloud said quietly. "This is sacred ground. And now you are its guardians." As the sun set behind the cliffs, casting long shadows across the valley, I realized why Robert Sr. had given Michael this inheritance. Not as a punishment, but as a test. And maybe, just maybe, as a chance for redemption. What we didn't know then was that others had already learned about the valley's secret, and they would stop at nothing to take it from us. The map Chief Red Cloud gave us changed everything. Beneath the valley's surface lay a vast network of underground springs and caves. But that wasn't what made the land sacred. The caves contained something far more precious, ancient petroglyphs and artifacts that told the story of the land's first peoples, preserved perfectly for thousands of years. The springs create a natural climate control system, Chief Red Cloud explained as we examined the map in the ranch house. "That's why the artifacts have survived so long. Your great-grandfather discovered the caves by accident while digging a well. When he realized what he'd found, he protected it," Michael finished, understanding dawning in his eyes. "That's why the family kept the land." "Yes, he made a pact with my grandfather, then chief of the council. The Thompson family would be the guardians, keeping the world away until the right time came." Before we could ask what the right time meant, the sound of approaching vehicles cut through the desert silence. Through the window, I saw 3 black SUVs racing up the dirt road, kicking up clouds of dust. Right on schedule, Chief Red Cloud muttered, quickly rolling up the map. Your brother works fast. Robert Jr. burst through the door without knocking, followed by two men in expensive suits. His face was flushed with excitement barely masked as concern. Michael, thank God you're here. Listen, there's something you need to know about this property. Our geological survey team found some interesting readings. Thompson Energy is prepared to make you a very generous offer. The land isn't for sale, Robert, Michael interrupted quietly. You know the conditions of the will. Robert's fake smile faltered. Don't be stupid, little brother. This is business. The survey shows potential for massive helium deposits. Do you have any idea how valuable those are? We're talking billions. Helium deposits. Chief Red Cloud's voice carried a hint of amusement. Is that what your instruments detected? Robert finally noticed the chief's presence, his expression turning cold. This is a private family matter. I'll have to ask you to leave. Actually, I stepped forward. Chief Red Cloud is here at our invitation. And he's right, your instruments aren't detecting helium deposits. The next hour was a crash course in the valley's true significance. Chief Red Cloud explained how the cave system's unique properties had preserved not just artifacts, but an entire lost history of the American Southwest. The readings Robert's team had detected were actually the vast underground springs that had protected these treasures for millennia. This site could rewrite everything we know about ancient Native American civilizations, I explained, my archaeological background finally proving useful. It's priceless, but not in the way you think. Robert's face grew darker with each word. You can't be serious. You'd throw away billions for some old cave paintings? This is exactly why Dad never trusted you with anything important. Actually, Michael's voice was stronger now. I think this is exactly why he did trust me with this. Because he knew I understand its real value. We'll see about that, Robert snarled, storming out. His parting shot carried clearly. The will says you have to maintain the property. Let's see how long you can do that without money. He was right about one thing, maintaining 300 acres of desert property wasn't cheap. Over the next months, Robert threw every obstacle he could at us. Our water rights were mysteriously challenged, road access was disputed. Anonymous complaints about property violations flooded the county office. But Robert had underestimated us, and the power of the valley's secret. Chief Red Cloud introduced us to Dr. Sarah Blackwood, a leading archaeologist specializing in Southwest Native American cultures. When she saw the cave system, she actually cried. This is unprecedented, she breathed, examining a perfectly preserved ceremonial chamber. The historical and cultural significance. This needs to be protected at all costs. Within weeks, Dr. Blackwood had helped us file for protected status with both state and federal authorities. The valley was declared a site of exceptional historical importance, making any industrial development impossible, regardless of who owned it. Robert was furious. His dreams of helium billions evaporated as news of the archaeological discovery spread through academic circles. But his final play was still to come. 6 months after the will reading, Catherine showed up at the ranch house. Unlike Robert's bullying, she tried honey. Mikey, she wheedled, using his childhood name, you're not thinking this through. Yes, the caves are historically important, but think bigger. We could build a cultural center, a museum, a resort celebrating Native American heritage. Thompson Energy would handle everything. You wouldn't have to worry about maintenance costs. I watched my husband's face, seeing the old pull of family approval warring with his newfound sense of purpose. But when he spoke, his voice was firm. The valley isn't a tourist attraction, Kath. It's a sacred trust. The answer is no. The honey vanished. You always were Dad's biggest disappointment, she snapped. Now I see why he gave you this worthless dirt. You deserve each other. But her words had no power anymore. Michael had found something stronger than his family's approval. He found his purpose. Working with Chief Red Cloud and Dr. Blackwood, we established the Serpent Valley Heritage Trust. The cave system was carefully documented while respecting its sacred nature. Select artifacts, chosen by the tribal council, were displayed in a small museum on the property, with proceeds supporting both site preservation and Native American education programs. 1 year after the will reading, Robert and Catherine returned, this time with lawyers. They claimed we have failed to maintain the property by allowing archaeological teams access. The hearing was held in the county courthouse. Robert's lawyers presented photos of research equipment, arguing this violated the will's requirement to keep the property in its current condition. Then our lawyer, the same one who had read the will, stood up. "I have here," he said, pulling out a sealed envelope, "Robert Thompson Sr.'s explicit instructions regarding the maintenance clause." He read, "The property must be maintained in its role as guardian of the valley's secrets, in partnership with the original guardians who showed my grandfather the truth." Robert Jr.'s face went white. The old lawyer continued, "Mr. Thompson approached me 10 years ago about this addendum. He knew exactly what would happen when his children learned about the valley." The case was dismissed. As we left the courthouse, I asked the lawyer why he hadn't revealed this earlier. Mr. Thompson was very clear, he smiled. Michael had to choose to protect the valley on his own, not because of his father's instructions. He had to prove he understood its true value. Today the valley remains a peaceful place, its secrets carefully protected. The old ranch house has become a research center, where archaeologists and tribal historians work together to unlock the mysteries of the caves while respecting their sacred nature. Michael has found his calling, combining his environmental science background with the valley's preservation. He's never been happier or more fulfilled. Robert and Catherine don't visit anymore, but sometimes I catch them looking at news articles about the unprecedented archaeological discoveries at Serpent Valley. Last week, we found something interesting in the old ranch house. A letter from Michael's great-grandfather to his son, written in 1943. This land's true worth isn't in what you can take from it, but in what you protect for the future. Some will call you a fool for guarding dust and rocks. Let them. The greatest treasures are often the ones that can't be sold. As I watch the sun set behind the ancient cliffs, painting the sky in colors no artist could capture, I think about value. How it's measured not in dollars, but in preservation, in respect, in understanding what truly matters. Robert Sr. knew exactly what he was doing when he gave Michael this worthless inheritance. He wasn't punishing his youngest son. He was entrusting him with something priceless. And sometimes that's the greatest gift of all.